Good day, friends. In today's video, I want to talk about the deep differences within the Indian military that have come in the public domain, that have come out regarding the structural reforms of the Indian military, also called theaterization, that has been going on for the last 5.5 years. Now, this should not have happened at this present time because we have two live borders with China and Pakistan, and Operation Sindoor is under pause. So it was at the Indian military conclave recently held in Mao called Ran Samvad, which is a discourse on war and warfare, that the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, made four observations that need close scrutiny. He said that within the Indian military, joint planning and joint coordination is a good thing, but there is no need for joint structures, referring to theaterization. So, once again, the Indian Air Force has come out against the concept of the theaterization, which is being done under the leadership of the Chief of Defense Staff. They do not accept that plan. Second, he said that decision making model should be as short as possible. Absolutely correct. Nobody can disagree because this is required to make sure that our kill chain closes faster than the kill chain of the enemy. The third point that he made was that core competency of each service should be retained. Absolutely correct. And the core competency of the Air Force is speed, flexibility, range, and precision. And given the fact that new technologies are getting inducted into the three services, it is absolutely important that all the three services they hone their core competencies. And the fourth point that the chief made was that India cannot go for theaterization model of any country, specifically mentioning America and China. Now, the model that is being followed under the leadership of the CDS is the American US military model, where they have a joint force in their integrated theater commands. Now, it is one thing for the chief of the air staff to say that because he is the insider, he knows what is going on. It is quite another when this thing comes out, even without his saying so in the public. And I was quite horrified that two fundamental things, which should have been really taken care of, resolved right from the beginning, even before the theaterization plan was embarked upon, they still remain unresolved. They are so fundamental and so important. And this I learned from this book, which has come out, been released now. This is by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Anil Chauhan. It was released a week ago. And here the CDS writes that there is a need to redefine the chain of command and the operational decision making matrix. I mean, these are so fundamental things. Now I can well understand as to why the chief of the air staff is very upset about this theaterization plan, which is actually being done piecemeal. Now, before I look at the key milestones of what has happened in the theaterization plan and what is wrong with it, it is important that I just give out once more for the benefit of viewers, those viewers who have not seen my earlier videos on warfare, the very basics of warfare, so that they are in line with the discussion that I will have now, the talk. Now, any war is fought at three levels. The lowest level is what is called tactics. This is where battles happen, this is where attrition happens, this is the lowest level of war. Then you have the middle level of war, which is called the operational level of war. And this is very important. This is much more than the outcome of all the battles in the tactical battle space. This is that level where the outcome of the war or the campaign is determined. And then at the top level, there is strategic level of war, which is where the political and the military leadership, they constantly talk with one another. So the point to make is that with the induction of new technologies and with the enunciation of the new war concept, the modern warfare is moving towards the operational level of war, which has become very critical. Please keep this in mind. Now, let me start with the theaterization of the Indian military. Now, we know it all began with General Bipin Rawat when he was still the army chief. He was very clear that he had this theaterization plan in mind. He must have discussed with the NSA and the other top level leaders, political leaders, and therefore, on the 1st of January 2020, he became India's first CDS for a period of 3 years. And his key task in the 3 years was to accomplish theaterization, create integrated commands, theater commands. So it was to be done by December of 2022, but unfortunately, he died in harness in December 2021. But as the army chief, he had already laid the foundation for his tenure of the CDS, which is now being carried forward by his successor CDS and the army chiefs. Two things he had done. One, he very clearly said that in any operation done by the Indian military, the Indian army will be the lead service. Then what he said is that joint operations which will lead to theaterization, they are imperative for the success of operations. They are essential. And by joint operation, what he meant was, as I said, Indian Army will be in the lead. So he did two test bed of two IBGs, which is integrated battle groups, a brigade plus, one against China, one against Pakistan. And the whole idea was that the IBG will move quickly inside the enemy territory and it will be constantly provided the air cover by the Indian Air Force. So the Air Force will be in support of the army. This was his concept fundamentally. This concept is being taken forward, as I said, by the army chiefs also. The present army chief has renamed the IBG as the Rudra Brigade with a bit of a add-on like UAV and a bit more logistics. Fundamentally, its function remains the same. Similarly, his successor CDS, now that is Anil Chauhan, who was in retirement as a 3-star officer. The government got him back, gave him the 4-star. He became a full general and he was made India's second CDS. He took command he took over in September 2022 to take forward the job which was started by General Rawat. Now, he said that theaterization will happen in 3 steps. One is jointness. Jointness is basically about bonding of the 3 services. Army, Air Force and Navy, they understand basically each other's culture and ethos. The second, he said, will be integration. So once jointness has been done, there are joint logistics, joint training, all that has done. Then you integrate. That means this is a physical thing. You actually bring all the 3 services together into one theater command, integrated theater command. And here he said what will happen is that the capability of the each service, its domain capability, it will become enhanced. The sum of the individual domains will be, once integrated, will be more. Why? Because he said that not only will they have the domain capability, integration will bring synergy also. So cross-domain capabilities they will have. So the Air Force can do a bit of Army job, the Army can do a bit of Air Force job for the land operation. This is the concept. And after that, then theaters are created. One theater for China, one theater for Pakistan, and one is the maritime theater. The 2 theaters for Pakistan and China, they will be headed by the army generals. This is the simple thing. Now, in the theater, the CDS made it very clear that what will happen is that the Indian military will be able to do multi-domain operations. Now, here he has digressed. He has digressed from what multi-domain operation actually means, which is an American concept. It is a concept of America, the same thing the PLA calls informatized warfare. Now, in the CDS thinking, which I learned from this book, and I was quite horrified, it is like that that he says that cyber and space, which are today we know agencies headed by two-star officers. We have the Defense Cyber Agency, Defense Space Agencies, and overall under the integrated headquarters, which is led by the CDS. They will be added some more capabilities, and then he calls them domains. He says that then the domain of cyber and space will be integrated with the existing domains of air, land, and sea, Army, Air Force, and Navy. So basically, what he has got confused is between a domain and a force multiplier, which is very important. What he is saying is that there will only be three physical domains, which is of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, but these capabilities that he's talking of now, new domains of cyber and space, and I'm sure the third one also is there, of the electronic warfare. Those three will basically enhance the capabilities of the existing physical domain, and hence they are force multipliers, they are not domains. When we talk of domain, what we are talking about is a capability to combat, confront, and contest in that particular domain against a peer competitor, which is an entirely different ball game, and which is what the American MOD is about. But I'll come to that in a while. So he has coined this as the definition. And he says then that once there is multi-domain operations in our integrated theater commands, then there will be network-centric warfare, which is about information superiority, and there will be data-centric warfare, which is about decision superiority. And data-centric warfare, he says, in 5 to 10 years, what this means is once the Indian military gets artificial intelligence, then data analytics, then quantum, all these technologies come, then the network centric warfare becomes data centric warfare. Now, once again, he has got confused in all the three definitions of what is network centric warfare, what is multi domain operations, and what is what he calls data centric warfare with artificial intelligence. This needs to be clarified. When we talk of network-centric warfare, please recall the 1991 Gulf War that the Americans or the coalition forces fought against Iraq. There were only two physical domains for the land battle, the the US Army and the US Air Force. Two domains only which were networked, and they were provided total support from the space. Space provided them surveillance, space provided them targeting capabilities, but it was still not a domain. So therefore, the operation that they did was a coordinated operation because there were two physical domains. Please remember at that time, the Americans under General Norman Schwarzkopf did 44 days of air campaign. Once that was over, only then the land war started, which lasted 100 hours of mopping operation. That was a coordinated operation. So the point to make is that when you have only physical domains, which is the case now, then the ideal thing to do is coordinated operation, which is what the Chief of the Air Staff has been talking about. Next, let's talk about multi-domain operation. I will explain what this is in a while, but this is about information superiority, and what the CDS says, data-centric warfare, this will help in decision superiority. It's wrong. He is confusing this data-centric warfare with what the Americans called algorithmic warfare or hyper warfare or mosaic warfare, and the PLA calls the same thing intelligence-sized warfare. It is not about decision superiority, it is about intelligence superiority, and that is an entirely different ball game because that is about autonomy. So he needs to be clear about these three fundamental definitions when we are talking about integrated theater commands. Not only that, another shocking thing that I found was on page 83 of this book, and I just need to read this. I'm just quoting from the book. He says, one can conclude that while network-centric warfare will result in superiority in one domain, data-centric warfare would facilitate superiority in one domain, bracket system of system, through a faster OODA loop. Honestly, I haven't understood what he is talking about. Perhaps in the next edition of this book, he will either rework this or delete this. So the point I'm making is that there are a lot of areas where there is no clarity at all, and it is not in sync with modern warfare, and that is what I want to talk about now. So the first is that in our scheme of thing, Indian scheme of thing, the army will be the lead service. Now, when we talk of modern war, we are talking about speed. We are talking about electronic fires, we are talking about cyber fires, we are talking about electromagnetic fires, which is the speed of light. And we are talking about kinetic fires, which is about the air force, which is about the land-based missiles. So it's all speed. And the least speed will be of the army, of the soldier. So how can the soldier or the army be the lead service? Please think about this. Next, he is talking about confusing the cyber agency plus calling it a domain, which when actually it is a force multiplier. And why it is important not to confuse this is because they have to be made a domain. Because I have said in so many of my earlier videos that in modern warfare, if you do not have the capability of competitiveness or superiority against a peer competitor in the continuum of cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and space, you lose the war. So please recognize they have to be made a domain. They cannot remain force multipliers. Next, they are talking about two land integrated theater commands. One for the PLA and one for the Pakistan military. Please understand the capabilities and the war concept of the two are as different as chalk and cheese. How can you have integrated similar commands against both with perhaps a bit give and take? It's a different war altogether. So you cannot do this and it will not work. Next, the idea of the operational level of war is not understood at the highest level by India's topmost military commander, because I was shocked to see in this book he has this chapter 7 which talks about tactics led force modernization. When you are talking of modern war, you are not talking tactics modernization at all. You are talking about the operational level of war. Now let me explain operational level of war as it is there with the PLA, India's primary threat, with the Pakistan military that we saw in Operation Sindoor, and still exists with the Indian military. As far as the PLA is concerned and the US military is concerned, one, what I said, calls it the informatized warfare, and the same calls it multi-domain operation. What that means is, let's take the example of PLA. PLA, we know today, can fight in 6 domains of war. And because they are individual domains, that means the concept of warfare is at the operational level through what is called the joint integrated operation. Now, when you are operating at the operational level of war, that means all the 6 domains, whatever they are doing is tactics. Whatever is happening in the air domain is tactics. What is happening in the land domain is all tactics. What is happening in the cyber domain is all tactics. That is the concept. It's an entirely different ball game. As far as Indian military is concerned, this is where the war with the PLA will start and finish, at the operational level of war. Now let us see the Pakistan military. What we saw in Operation Sindoor, that they have learned a lot from the PLA. And we saw the Pakistan Air Force operating at the operational level of war, something I've explained in my earlier videos. And I've also explained that after Operation Sindoor, they have created what is called the rocket force command under the Pakistan army, which again will operate at the operational level of war. Therefore, the Pakistan military is understanding with help or and working with the PLA that operational level of war is important. Also, please understand that for the Pakistan military, the competitor or the challenge is the Indian military. It only has to stay one step ahead. It need not create completely independent cyber command or space command. So long as it can operate freely in that, it's good enough for it. It's only for the PLA that has to create independent commands, domains. Why independent domains? Because its competition is with the US military. Now let's see the case of the Indian military. What's going on here? For the Indian military, still, it all the three services believe that they can do their war by themselves. For example, the Indian Air Force, when it is in support of the Indian Army, it calls that tactical operations. But when it is doing air superiority missions, that it calls the operational level of war. Similarly, for the Indian Army, when it is doing the contact battle, it is called tactics. But as you go deep inside, you have the division, you have the corps, you have the army, then it becomes the operational level of war. In other words, the Indian military, even today, misunderstands what is the tactical level. It is trying to use operational art in tactical level of war, which is not compatible, which is not in sync with modern warfare. Next, as I said, there is a need to very clearly understand the difference between network centric warfare and the multi domain operations and the algorithmic warfare. What the CDS is talking about, data centric warfare. They are different and know the difference. So, the point I'm making is that all this has happened because the preparatory time that should have been done in first creating a blueprint for theaterization, that was not done. General Rawat just started on the journey of theaterization all by himself without any consultation with the Air Force and the Navy. But Navy, of course, is a different thing I'm not going into right now. So he embarked piecemeal, and repeatedly the Air Force therefore has not accepted the theaterization plan. Now, my last point, which is very important point, is for India, which has to first secure its sovereignty against two formidable adversaries. On one side, PLA, on the other side, what we saw in Sindoor, one front reinforced threat or war by the Pakistan military. That is the critical issue. Not to do theaterization, which is done by the militaries which have out of area operations. Please consider the PLA. In the PLA, once Xi Jinping became the president in November 2012, after that, what he did was in 2013, the Belt and Road was announced. And this is the time after he announced the Belt and Road Initiative that he set up the committee to think as to how that Belt and Road has to be protected, because it will go all around the globe, and the PLA was given the added responsibility of protecting the Chinese people, the Chinese interest, and the Chinese infrastructure as part of the Belt and Road across the globe. And this is why finally they came up with their 2014 military strategy, which is something that the Indian military and the CDS should read very carefully. And as a consequence of that, they did their major structural reforms, which created the Western Theatre Command. So, what we are trying to do, or the CDS is trying to do, is putting the cart before the horse. India has to first build its capabilities, and as the capabilities build along with that, then look at the war concept and first look at how the two borders can be secured, how the deterrence can be created. And as I repeatedly say, let me say it once more, all this will not happen when Operation Sindoor is under pause or the two borders are live. You need peace. You need peace with Pakistan and you need peace with China. Thank you so much.